everybody, my name is Tanya and welcome to my wrap up for January 2015. So I had a good reading month in January. I was able to complete 10 things and I made some progress on some others. I had some good weeks and some bad weeks in terms of reading, and my TBR was sent slightly off track by the Underhyped Reads readathon, which I knew was coming, but I hadn't really thought about it at all when I was doing my TBR. It was kind of not on my radar at that point in time. I made a TBR video for that and I had intended to make a specific wrap-up video for the readathon, but it didn't really happen. So it's been a couple of weeks since I put up my last video, and yeah. Last weekend, as I said in my Underhyped Reads TBR video, my sister got married last weekend, and so there was a lot of wedding stuff that was happening around that, and then just a lot of chilling out afterwards and recuperating from all the sleep deprivation around it. But it was a fantastic day. I had a fantastic time. That happened in the middle of the readathon, so I had a bit of an interruption there, and then I kind of really couldn't be bothered filming a video that weekend after the wedding happened because reasons, and now it's the Sunday the 1st of February and I figure I better get back to filming some videos. So there were a few things that I carried over from December into January, and they were the ones that I finished first in the month. So the first book that I finished in the month was Dreamer's Pool by Juliet Marillier. This is the one that I've been mentioning for a few months that I went over to Western Australia and attended the book launch for, and I hadn't read the book. As we open with this one, our two main characters of Blackthorn and Grimm are actually incarcerated, and Blackthorn, our female lead, has been condemned to die. And one of the fair folk visits her the night before she's going to be killed and offers her a lifeline to get out. But that lifeline comes with conditions, and those conditions really restrict her movements for the next 7 years of her life. So this is a book that's told from three different perspectives. We have Blackthorn, we have Grimm, who is also in the prison with Blackthorn at the start, and the third perspective is Oren, who is a prince who is awaiting his new bride to arrive, and when she finally does arrive, things aren't quite as he was expecting. So I don't want to say too much more about the plot of this. This is the first in a series, and it's recently announced that the second in the series is going to be released in October this year, so really excited about that. I don't know why it took me so long to pick this up, but fantastic as all of Juliet Marillier's books are, and I am just so pleased that I finally read it. Next up, I finished what I had left of The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This is the one that I was reading with the BookTube Reading Buddies in December, and I had some issues with this one that kind of held me up. I'm finding it hard to articulate exactly what it was that I had a bit of an issue with. There was something just slightly jarring with the language I think that I had. I'm not quite sure whether it's his writing style or whether it's the translation of the work, but there was something just slightly off that I had trouble with at the start. As it went on, this did pick up, and it was intriguing. I think it was probably a little bit melodramatic towards the end. I'm glad that I read this, but I was disappointed because I've been meaning to read it for years, and I thought it was something that I would absolutely love. And it just wasn't that for me, and possibly that's my own expectations on it, but it turned out to be, it was an enjoyable read. So this opens in Spain in the 1940s, and a young boy, Daniel, is taken to the Cemetery of Forgotten Books, which is a huge labyrinth of books, forgotten books, and he's told he's allowed to take one. And the book he selects is The Shadow of the Wind by Julian Crax. But when he goes to find more books by this author, he finds that somebody has been systematically destroying everything that he's ever published. And the story kind of goes from there. This is touted as a book for book lovers, and it's a book all about books, and I did enjoy that side of it. I don't know, there was something I just didn't quite connect with. Next up, I finished another audiobook that I had left over from December, and that was My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. This was technically the read for du Maurier December that Kirsty from Kirsty on Books had organised, and I really didn't participate in that at all, and it wasn't until quite late in December that I finally started My Cousin Rachel, but oh my god. So going into this, I'd only read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier and absolutely loved it. That was a few years ago now, and I'd been wanting to read something by her for ages, so I read this one on Kirsty's suggestion, and it was fantastic. This is a story of Philip Ashley, who is orphaned and is raised by his older cousin Ambrose. Ambrose, when Philip is in his early 20s, has to spend time in Italy for his health, and there he meets a cousin of theirs, a kind of distant cousin of theirs, Rachel. Now, Ambrose is a determined bachelor and has no need for a woman, but word comes that he and Rachel have married. They continue to stay in Italy, and before he has brought Rachel home to meet Philip, Ambrose dies. And he's sent some cryptic kind of messages before that death, and has Rachel had a hand in it, or has she not? So Philip is dead against Rachel. He's convinced that she has caused the death of his beloved cousin, and then she arrives in England and he begins to rethink. The whole way through this, I wasn't sure who I was meant to like and who I was meant to dislike and who I was meant to trust and who I wasn't meant to trust. Did she or didn't she have a hand in Ambrose's death? Or Philip as quite a naive young man? Is he completely mistaken? Really, really fascinating, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The next book I finished in January was my BookTube Recommends project pick for the month, and that was Monkey Grip by Helen Garner. This was the pick that was recommended to me by Sophie of Sophie the Uneducated Reader. I was so pleased to read this. I really, really enjoyed it. I have filmed a review about it. I suspect it was a complete mess. I haven't actually looked at the footage yet. I really do need to look at the footage and either work out whether I can cobble something together from it or film something new before I lose it. But there will be a full video about this, so I'm not going to talk about it too much except to say this is incredibly Australian and I love that about it. The next portion of this video will be dedicated to the Unhyped Reads Readathon. The first book I read was my first school pick for this month, so the first of my Year 7 reads. This is Beware the Gingerbread House by Emily Rodda. Again, I'm not going to say too much about this because I am planning on doing a Year 7 wrap-up for these two books that I read in Year 7. So this is a book that I read that had the most ratings on Goodreads. It had 133 before mine. Basically, this is about a group of teenagers that form a kind of part-time jobs group and mystery ensues. And then the second book I finished for the Unhyped Reads Readathon, and the second book of my school reads for the month was Soldier on the Hill by Jackie French. This, again, I will talk about more shortly, but this one is set during World War II in Australia and is set around the time of the Japanese threat to Australia. This one had 64 ratings on Goodreads before my review, and yes, putting some thoughts together soon. And then the third book I finished for the Unhyped Reads Readathon was The Comic Box by Adrian Sterling. Now this is the one that was written by my English teacher. This is his second novel, and I had some issues. So this is set in suburban Australia in 1986 during the time of Halley's Comet, and you know, that was a factor, but it wasn't really a big part of the story. What the story actually ends up following is a particular family. This follows the character of Andrew, and at the start of the novel his older sister Amelia runs away, and it kind of follows the story of why and is she ever going to come back. When it was revealed why she had run away, it wasn't, oh, is that all? But because it is a big thing, but it was kind of okay. I'd been expecting something a little bit more high impact than that. I know this is a young adult book, but still. And then the family's reaction to it? The tagline on the front of it is "Some secret should stay buried," and that rubs me up the wrong way too, because the secret that we're covering here, well, no, I don't think it should stay buried. And I think a big part of what I didn't like about it is the rest of the family kind of want to stick their heads in the sand and ignore that there is a problem there, and actually ostracize the sister because she's making them focus on it. And for parents to their teenage child, I think that's horrible. I did enjoy this. Just kind of the more I think about that ending, doesn't quite sit right with me. But it was really interesting reading this alongside my Year 7 picks and thinking about that time in my life. And I'm really glad to have read another book by Adrian Sterling. As I said, he had written another one that I've read a few years ago now. So the first 4 days of the read-along had gone really well. Then the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I got sidetracked by wedding things, and that was fine. That was absolutely fine. I didn't really read anything for the Friday, Saturday. I did start another book on the Sunday, but I didn't finish it, and I'm really not all that worried about it. So the book I started next was South of Darkness by John Marsden. I got about 50 pages into this during the readathon, and I've read a little bit more now, so I'm around the 100-page mark. I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm hoping I can get back to it soon, but I went back to other things that I had put down because of the Unhyped Reads and wanted to finish. And then the last book that I read a little bit of during the Unhyped Reads readathon was Godfather was a girl and Blanche Shabab was a guy. This is the one with the lowest amount of ratings. It's only got 18 ratings on Goodreads. I got around 20 pages into this. I read the first chapter. This, as I said in my TBR, is kind of the origin stories for different characters in popular culture. So the section that I read was the alpha males, and so it's got, you know, things like the inspiration for Rocky Balboa and Crocodile Dundee, and they're just these little one-page blurbs about kind of the real character who inspired these and some of the stories behind them, which is really interesting. It's just not something that has a narrative that I'm wanting to then pick up. The next book I finished was the audiobook I moved on to after My Cousin Rachel, Tender as the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is one of the gorgeous Crowley Bickford Smith designed covers, and I think it's just stunning. I didn't actually read this, I listened to it, but I was really looking forward to reading some more Fitzgerald. I read The Great Gatsby a couple of times and enjoyed that one. I didn't enjoy this one as much, but at the same time I don't think I enjoyed Gatsby as much the first time that I read it as I do now, or at least I do the memory of it now. So I'm wondering how my perception will change as time goes on. I can't say that I really connected with a lot of the characters, but again, when I think about it, I don't really connect with many of the characters in Gatsby. Everybody's quite hateful in there, so it's interesting that a lot of the reasons that I say I don't like it are also things I don't necessarily like about Gatsby either. This is in large part the study of a marriage, and a marriage that is based on not necessarily the best foundation, and I don't want to give too much away because it is kind of slowly revealed throughout the novel and we get more of their backstory. But as things open, Nick and Nicole Diver are, staying on the French Riviera, and the young actress Rosemary Hoyt comes in and is enamored with Dick, and so there's perceived and perhaps actual interest between the two of them, and the effect that then that starts to have on the marriage between Dick and Nicole. And then we go back in time and find out how they met and the histories of these characters, and it was interesting, but I didn't find myself really caring about the characters, and that made it hard to want to know what happened to them. And next is something that I absolutely loved, and something that I kind of put down or was reading in little snippets through the underhyped reads, but is something that's very hyped, and that is Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie. This is something that's been all over BookTube lately, and I recently bought it, and then a wonderful group of booktubers have created the Blank Space Book Club, and I'll leave links to some details about that down below. And the first book that they read was Ancillary Justice, and since I just recently purchased it like the week before, I just decided to jump on that and really enjoyed this. It did take me quite some time. It is very complex. I had a tweet the other day saying I was trying to gather my thoughts, but I don't think I'm ever going to be able to say anything at all coherent about this, and I think that's still true. I loved it, but if I tried to give you a plot, I don't think I can. This is definitely very heavy sci-fi and is very complex, and that was fantastic, but it would definitely not be for everybody. I love the experience of reading this, and I'm definitely looking forward to moving on to the second book in the series at some point in time. And then finally, the last book I completed for the month, I started and finished on the 31st, and that was my Agatha Christie for the month, One Tree Bug in My Shoe. This was one that was a first time read for me, and no, I did not guess the whodunit because I can't guess the whodunit, but this was another Poirot story. And so this starts with his trip to the dentist and various other characters' trip to the dentist, and then later in the day Poirot is called back because that dentist is found dead, and so he has presumably committed suicide, but Poirot is not so convinced. Really enjoyed it. As I said, completely off base when thinking about whodunit. There was some certain ones that I went, nah, they definitely didn't do it, and they didn't, but I didn't pick the who did. So you win some, you lose some. I did really enjoy this. I have given it a 4-star rating. I'm trying to curb myself from doing the knee-jerk 5-star rating for Agatha Christie because she's fantastic and I love her, but I do have some cream of the crop favourites of favourites, and if I give everything by her 5 stars, that isn't reflected. And so that covers all the things that I was able to read in January. There were some things that were on my TBR for the month that I didn't get to, mostly because I got sidetracked by unhyped reads. So I put Peter Manderson's What We See When We Read on the list as something from the Book Riot Quarterly box to make some progress, and I haven't read that, and oh well. One that I had hoped to get to and I haven't, and now I'm horribly behind, but we'll just see what happens, is The Summer Tree by Guy Gabriel Kay. This was for Sabrina at Staccaccino's seasonal series read-along, and I haven't picked it up. And then lastly, I'd mentioned I was possibly buddy reading this with Nimmy from Nimmy M, and it hasn't happened at this stage. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen for February at this stage. We're just kind of seeing what happens. So I'm going to stop showing it to you for now, but one day I'll tell you I've read it. So these were all the books that I was able to finish in the month of January, and I'm really pleased with all of that. If you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments, or if you have any questions. As always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!